Hi, welcome to this RSPA Education session called Secure Remote Access. I'm Mark Heaston. I'm a Senior Leader for Channel Marketing at WorldPay. I'm joined today by Nathan Sweeney, who is a Senior Security Consultant with Secure Ideas, a firm that's dedicated to delivering security solutions for businesses. Thanks for being here, Nathan.
Good to be here, Mark.
Before we get started, I want to encourage you to consider RSPA membership. If you already have a membership, then I want to encourage you to get the most out of the resources that are available for you in your organization. The educational series is intended to present important topics that are of interest to RSPA members and other industry professionals. As a benefit of your membership with RSPA, there are a ton of resources that are available for you. Free legal advice, contracts and agreements, important information regarding the EMV shift, which has been a hot topic for the last couple, 3 years, and then membership or member business resources portal, which has a ton of great information in it as well. If you're wondering why RSPA offers more than 100 documents and guides for managing your business effectively, including customer contracts and agreements, internal and employee documents, so you can make sure that you're managing your business properly, security and PCI resources, EMV content that includes everything from webinars to videos to white papers, learning tracks, anything that is going to help educate you and your team on the EMV matters, and of course information on security, which is the reason why we're talking to Nathan today. Nathan, why don't we start off? We're talking about secure remote access. So what is secure remote access, and who needs to learn the ins and outs of that topic?
Yeah, so the idea of secure remote access is that we're going to take that remote access that people are already using. You know, every reseller out there has to support their merchants. Back in the day, they used to jump in a truck and drive on site and fix the cash register. Today, everything's computerized, and sending people out in the field, to remote locations to go fix minor problems that can be fixed remotely is a waste of money. It's a waste of time. That merchant needs to get things fixed quickly so they can get back to business. So every reseller out there is using some form of remote access in order for their technicians to efficiently service their customers. The idea of secure remote access is that we quite simply want to secure that connection. We want to put the configurations in place, we want to put the processes in place, and we want to train the people so that the people that need access are able to get it and able to provide that service, but the bad guys who are trying to get access can't. As far as who needs access to that or who needs to understand the topic, it's really everybody. The merchants need to understand they have a compliance responsibility, and honestly, they just have a responsibility as the owner of that facility to protect their interests. And so they need to understand at a really high level how this works. They need to understand that you as a reseller are using a secure remote access tool, and you're not using something that's going to cause them problems.
Got it.
Executives or management at the integrator or the reseller level, they need to understand what they're offering. They need to understand that they are using a secure solution, one that's not going to present risk to their merchants, and one that's not going to open themselves up to risk. The salespeople need to understand the process of how that works and how to educate their merchants. I think we'll talk some more about that. And then you have the technicians who are actually using the service. They need to not only understand how it works, they need to understand their role in using that tool correctly so that it doesn't open up a door to somebody nefarious.
Great, thank you. We've seen, and we were talking about this earlier, we've seen just recently a lot of, especially over the last 5 years even, a lot of breaches that have occurred where user or customer data has been exposed because hackers have gotten into large-scale, large brand systems. I hear this a lot as a small merchant. I own one store. I'm a small business owner. Do I really need to be that worried about hackers? I mean, what hacker is going to be targeting me, and how are they even aware of me, right?
Yeah, that's a great question. So there's kind of a paradigm shift that people need to begin to understand. If you have a business in a very risky location, you're going to put bars on the doors. You're going to have an alarm system. You're going to have cameras. If you own mom and pa's truck stop in small town America, you may not even lock the doors. I know places in rural Oklahoma that they have no concerns about security because the types of people that are going to come up on the business are just different, and they understand that inherently. The problem is when we introduce the internet Now that business that's in rural Oklahoma, it's an IP address on the internet, and it's the exact same as an IP address at Walmart or Target or anybody else. That bad guy that's in Eastern Europe or China or Russia or wherever it may be, maybe it's just down the street, that guy, he scans a bunch of IPs and he may hit you, he may hit a large guy. There's no difference to him. He's going after vulnerable software. And so by allowing the features and the functionality of using the internet, I mean, it's a great resource. All the cool things that we can do that we couldn't do 10 or 15 years ago, by allowing that, we've also added some risk. And so what we need to do is help mitigate that risk by making sure that we are, securing those solutions.
Yeah, so if I'm on the internet, then to your analogy before, being in a riskier neighborhood or a riskier area, I'm de facto in a risky place all the time.
Exactly. Every time somebody connects to your secure your remote access solution, you don't know if it's the reseller's technician who is trying to help you with a problem. You don't know if it's some guy sitting in some shady internet cafe halfway around the world that's trying to steal your credit card data.
And this is a little bit of an adjacent topic, but because I am a small business, am I naturally a good target for hackers because they're making an assumption that I don't have the rigorous protections that large organizations do?
There is some of that, right?
Yeah.
So a large organization, they're not only going to have a large IT staff, they're going to have a dedicated security team that's trying to make sure things are being done right. Most small companies don't even have an IT staff, let alone people dedicated to security. So there is that inherent, like, hey, these people are doing this. The other side of it is the ecosystem, the point of sale ecosystem tends to be such that merchants are supported by a reseller or an integrator. And that integrator reseller has a lot of customers. And so the bad guys know, hey, if I find a vulnerability or a flaw here, it's probably not just this merchant. It's probably in 100 others or 1,000 others. So they're looking for those situations where they can hit that guy and all the others at the same time. And if they can hit the merchant or the reseller first and then use that to get out to the others, that's even better. That's like a gold mine.
So for our reseller listeners or watchers of this, how do I begin to have a constructive conversation with my merchants about this? How can I convey to them the importance of secure remote access and to really be thinking about security beyond kind of the day in, day out functioning of my business? How do I become a consultant? Or I think you refer to them as you got to play a role of trusted advisor. How do I do that?
That's a great question. I mentioned when I was at Tulsa Cash Register, I had a grocery store guy that I worked with. He owned this grocery store, and he said, I sell meat and potatoes. I don't care about the point of sale system. Make it work so I can sell meat and potatoes. And so there's a distance there you have to come across. You have to help them understand not just here's the risk that you have, but here's what you need to do to solve it. So there's a lot of education that needs to happen. One of the dangers, and most salespeople know this, is one of the dangers is that when you come in and you say, here's a problem that you need to deal with, oh, by the way, we have a solution that we'll sell to fix it, it kind of looks like you're trying to nickel and dime them, and a lot of people think that. And so you got to be able to kind of get into that position of a trusted advisor where you say, we want to help educate you. We want to teach you about security. We want to teach you about the risks that you have. We want to teach you about the compliance obligations they have. Most merchants don't realize that when they start taking credit cards, they sign a lot of documents that say they have these obligations. And those aren't just you should do this. These have legal backing. So there's that level of education that needs to happen. And I think that's a great spot for resellers to jump into and help educate these merchants.
Right, it's a great role to be, again, so you're not caught in that cycle of the nickel and the dime or the fee, having to explain fees. You've played a role of a security consultant from the very beginning.
Absolutely.
Right. And for the intent of protecting your business, right?
Yeah.
Let's pivot a little bit. Let's talk about two-factor authentication. I know it's a hot topic. We've talked about it quite a bit. For those who may not know, what is it and why is it super important for merchants? Again, thinking back on the consultative piece, why do I need to sell my merchants on two-factor authentication? What is it and why do I need to sell them on it?
Okay. Well, so let's break it down a little bit. The idea of authentication is I'm going to verify that you are you, right? Now, as people, we do that through several things. I hear your voice and I recognize it. I see your face and I recognize it. Our minds have that recognition, so I authenticate you. When you're a number on the internet, it's really hard to do that authentication. When you're logging into a computer system, anybody could know that username. So we traditionally use a password, right? We have that password that says, yes, I'm the only person that knows this password. Well, the problem is passwords get leaked. passwords get stolen, maybe they get guessed, maybe they get brute forced. There's a lot of different ways that a bad guy could get both the username and the password. So the idea of two-factor authentication is that we want to have a second factor of authentication, a second way for us to verify that you are who you say you are. You know, it would be great if every time you want to log into this system, I could just walk over there, verify that you're you, and say, yep, he's good, let's go. But that doesn't work remotely. So what we see is there's a lot of solutions out there where, you know, maybe it's an application on your phone where I type in my username, I type in my password, and then I type in a code that's on my phone and it changes every 60 seconds. That's a common one. Another solution is a key fob that I carry around. You know, the RSA Secure ID tokens have become very big in that space. So I carry this key fob around, and it's the same deal. That token number changes every 60 seconds or 120 seconds. And so I don't care who has that token number. I can give it out because in 60 seconds it's not good anymore. There's other solutions out there where I can have it, you know, when I try to log in, the system on the back end sends me a text message with a number. My bank does that. It sends me a text message. I take that number and I type it into the system that I'm trying to authenticate to. And what they know now is they know that I know the password and that I have my phone. So as long as it's tied to my phone and I don't lose my phone, then I'm good to go. So an attacker has to take both of those in order to authenticate as me.
Well, it's interesting. A lot of the examples you're throwing out there just show how well seated two-factor authentication is in a number of different applications.
Absolutely.
So it's super important for merchants. And again, as RSPA members are talking to their clients, that maybe small businesses have not adopted two-factor authentication to the extent that it should be. So it's a natural place for them to, again, play that trusted advisor, come in and say, hey, look, this is not a new technology, but let's apply it to your business and make sure that you're protecting yourself.
Absolutely. The principles of two-factor authentication have been around for almost a decade now. We're finally getting to that point of commoditization where it's becoming cheap, and there's lots of solutions out there, and you can pick one that's, you know, easy and effective and works with your solution. At a risk of maybe getting a little bit off topic, I advocate that you should use two-factor authentication with everything. If you have a PayPal account, if you play video games, if you have your bank, you know, whatever it is I love companies that roll out two-factor authentication just to log into your laptop at work. It's a pain, it's a nuisance, but you get used to it really quickly, and it provides an incredible level of security.
Great. Along the lines of this topic, and again, I'm not going to pin you down on picking vendors, or I mean, you mentioned RSA as an example, but what are some of the best remote access tools that exist out there that would be helpful for the resellers who are watching this, and the kinds of tools that may be helpful to having that sort of trusted advisor conversation with merchants? Do you have any recommendations, or even kind of a broad brush, what you'd recommend to think about?
Yeah, so that's a great question. There's a couple of options. I take that back. There's a lot of options. RSA is a big one. It's been around forever. It's very expensive, and unless you're a large business or an enterprise, you're going to have a hard time adopting that. There's a lot that are designed for the small guy. There's one that's become very popular called Duo, D-U-O. They do a phone-based type thing where they text you or call you, that sort of thing. They have a lot of ability to integrate into different systems. But for most of our audience, I think, their options are going to be limited to the tools they use. You know, so if they select this remote access tool, it will either have two-factor auth built in, or it will say, hey, we can use this tool over here or that tool. I've got on my phone, I have the Google Authenticator app, and the Google Authenticator app is a free tool from Google that lots of other two-factor auth systems use. So when I open my Authenticator app, I have a number for my LastPass. I have a number for my Amazon AWS account. I have one for my PayPal account. I have one for my bank. I have one for another investment company. And these are all using the same tool, so it's easy and it's convenient for me to have all right there. And yet they're all integrated into all these other systems.
Nathan, are there any specific remote access tools that you recommend, even if it's just at a kind of a high level? But are there any things that you recommend for resellers?
Sure. I hate to too strongly recommend certain tools because I don't want to say this one is the best or don't use that one or that sort of thing. A lot of tools have different feature sets, and depending on the needs of the reseller and the needs of the merchant, different tools have different areas of expertise. There are a couple of RSPA members that provide some remote access tools that are fantastic. Vigilex is one. They have a whole suite of tools, and they provide secure remote access in addition to that, and they do the two-factor auth and logging and all that kind of stuff. They do a great job. There's another one called NetOp, and they have a remote access tool that works really well. Again, these are PCI compliant. They've gone through the process of making sure they're doing it right and securely. There's a lot of others out there. LogMeIn is very, very popular.
Yeah.
Things like GoToAssist. There's a lot of great ones out there. There are some older things like, back in the day, everybody used PC Anywhere, and you opened a port and anybody could connect into that port and that kind of thing. PC Anywhere is actually still around, I believe. They've modified that so it's a little bit better than it used to be. But the main thing is that the reseller, when they're selecting that tool, or if it's the merchant, they need to understand the technologies that are being used, and they need to understand that that tool meets certain configuration guides and certain requirements for PCI and that sort of thing in order to be secure.
It's a great opportunity let's talk about PCI for a second.
Okay.
What are PCI's requirements for remote access?
So there's a lot. PCI, spread throughout the PCI guidelines, there's several different places where it talks about remote access and how to secure it and that sort of thing. The first thing I'm going to tell you is not specific to PCI, but it's kind of a good practice, and it kind of relates. PCI mandates that you only allow inbound and outbound traffic through your firewall that is necessary for business operations. And in general, what that means is you don't want to allow incoming traffic if you can prevent it. So like with PC Anywhere, when I talked about that, the remote support person, they had to connect into the environment. With the newer systems out there, the systems connect out. So like for instance with LogMeIn, just to give you an example, when the client is running on the point of sale system with LogMeIn, it's phoning home to LogMeIn server, and then the resell technician can connect to that server and from there piggyback in on that connection. So it doesn't require any changes in the firewall. So that's one thing to look for. PCI kind of partially suggests that without just coming out and saying it. Some other things that you need to make sure you don't do is you don't need to have any kind of default password. You need to make sure that every user has their own account and there's not, here's the standard password that all of our technicians use. There's been a number of resellers that have been breached that way, where they have one account that everybody uses, that account gets breached, and now that attacker has access to all those merchants. There's some, two-factor authentication. PCI specifically says that anybody connecting into the cardholder data environment needs to require two-factor authentication. So that's critical for that. There are some things that PCI requires that are very difficult. One of those is it says that anybody that's connecting in, a third-party vendor, they need to, the connection needs to be enabled only when necessary, and then disabled automatically when it's not necessary anymore. That works very difficult for merchants that, maybe there's nobody in the cash office or in the manager's office or wherever that point of sale server is. Maybe there's nobody in there on a regular basis to go enable that connection. They need to be able to call their support guy and say, help, I need somebody to fix this. That support guy needs to be able to connect right in and fix it. And so there's some issues there that resellers have to work out when they're looking at those tools. Can I do this and be PCI compliant? Okay, if I can't comply with this, how big a deal is that? Are there other compensating controls that I can put in place and that sort of thing? Especially for small merchants, level 4 merchants, I always recommend that people focus on security first. You make sure you're doing things right and secure, and then do PCI second. Because if you're secure and you really are doing it right and you're doing the best you can, PCI is going to take care of itself at the level 4 level. You know what I mean? So there's things to consider. Another thing that PCI requires is logging. You need to make sure that every connection into the environment is being logged. And ideally that whenever you have anything that's suspicious or odd, that generates an alert. Just having those logs doesn't help if nobody's ever looking at them. So, you need to have somebody go in and look at those logs on a regular basis and say, hey, why did Joe's account log into this merchant at 4 o'clock in the morning? We don't have a service ticket in the computer. What happened? What's that about? Or worse, why did this one account connect to 300 merchants over a 3-day period? That should never happen. So that kind of monitoring of logs is critical. And then the other thing that PCI requires is that those accounts auto disconnect. so that when you connect in, that connection doesn't just stay live forever, that it auto disconnects after a period of time. And to be clear, most of the remote access tools out there that would be considered a secure remote access tool, they've already played through all this. They understand, they have the configuration settings in place. You just have to use them and set them up correctly.
You touched on the use of generic passwords. You touched on the importance of passwords, that you want to be very thoughtful in the kind of how they're configured, how they're used, who has access to them. Is there anything else you want to mention in terms of generic? We talked before about what are the risks of using generic passwords, and I know that we've got another topic, another part of the educational series where we go in depth on passwords. But is there anything else you'd add to the need for better, smarter passwords?
Yeah. So I don't want to go into too much detail on here's how to configure a good password.
Yeah.
But there are some definite things that need to happen, and this is a training thing, an education thing, both for the merchant and for the the technicians that will be using the service. They need to understand that they should have a unique password per system. That if I'm logging into this remote access tool with this password, it shouldn't be the same password that I log into my computer with. It shouldn't be the same password that I log into my email with. Because if one of those systems gets popped, now that attacker can reuse that password to get into the other. They also need to understand how to make secure passwords. You shouldn't have like you said, you shouldn't have a generic password that's used on all the different systems. If your remote access tool requires a password to log into the merchant's system, then you need to have a unique password for every merchant. You can't have a standard, here's the default password that my company uses to log into merchants, because once that gets known, then that's going to be used by everybody.
One last question for you. What else can resellers do to protect themselves and protect their merchants? Is there anything that we haven't covered that you'd recommend is important for them to consider?
So, reviewing the configuration of your systems, understanding, we've talked about a little about understanding some of the configurations and options, having somebody that knows how it's supposed to be set up, and then actually validating that those things are happening is important. That's not just monitoring the logs. That's going in and saying, hey, we have two-factor auth turned on for everybody, but is anybody able to disable that? Is it possible that we have a technician that went and disabled that for his account because it's annoying? Or do we have a merchant that has modified their configuration to make it easier for them to connect in and expose themselves to risk that maybe they don't know about? You have other solutions, like I talked about LogMeIn and GoToAssist and Vigilex and some of these that are hosted by somebody else. There's a lot of solutions out there that are hosted by the reseller, and they're managing a server internally that then connects to all their systems. So that system obviously needs to be extremely secure. You need to make sure that that's in a separate segment by itself and that that's being securely configured. I think we're also going to have a whole nother segment on firewall management and configuration, stuff like that. So understanding how to do those things properly is really critical.
So if you're interested in learning more about this, any of this, this topic or any of the others that we've covered, how can people connect with you?
Yeah, so the easiest way is just to email me you can email me at securityadvisor@gorspa.org. You can also go onto our website, gorspa.org, and there's a Ask the Advisor section. Once you're a member, you'll be able to log in and gain access to resources specific to security as well as all the other benefits that we talked about. But you can ask me a question directly there from the website, and that'll come straight to me as well.
Great. Nathan, thank you very much for the time.
Thanks a lot, Mark.